On July 22, 2022, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation contacted the Walton County Sheriff's Office, leading them to a cyber tip received from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. They suspected CSAM had been uploaded to a Google account in Walton County, Georgia. So the authorities went to where they would find the person who had received the CSAM, Hunter Lawless. Not much is known about who he is, but the police knows he's the one who received CSAM from his Google account, and he also basically admitted to viewing the pictures and videos. The police questioned him where he got these contents from, to which he replied that he had been receiving these contents from a guy named Zach Zulog. Lawless was then sent to court, where he pleaded guilty to sexual exploitation of children and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. He agreed to give the investigators details about who Zach Zulog is. It turns out his full name is Zachary Jacoby Zulog. Zachary Zulog was a banker, and it turns out that his boyfriend William Zulog, who worked for the government, was also in it as well. These two had been married for over 5 years, and they had adopted 2 kids who were around the age of 10 from a special needs agency for kids. The biological parents of these 2 kids couldn't take care of their kids due to substance abuse, so therefore they had been put up for adoption. However, the Zulog couple were not much better either, since they carry out terrible acts on the kids, such as sexual abuse. Once the investigators gathered all the information from Hunter Lawless, police quickly began to obtain a search warrant for the Walton County residence where the Zulogs had stayed. Once the police arrived at their home, they bashed open the front door. When they saw both Zachary and William, the officers quickly restrained both individuals. Officers then proceeded to investigate the house, where they got hold of both Zachary's and William's electronic devices, which had 7 terabytes of CSAM. All the videos and photos were of Zachary and William sexually abusing their 2 sons in the worst ways possible. The couple also had cameras around the house, which the investigators looked into, where they saw all the abuse they inflicted on the kids around different parts of the house. Officers had all the evidence they needed to send the couple to prison. During their court appearance, Zachary and William admitted to everything, and they also admitted wanting to share their 2 kids with other pedophiles on the web, including Lawless. They also fully admitted they had been doing this since they first adopted the 2 kids. After the court hearing, the 2 men were charged and sentenced to 100 years in prison without parole. After researching this case, I'm glad they got life in prison, although I was hoping for something more severe such as the death penalty. But we all know how the system works. And it's honestly heartbreaking for the 2 kids. They never wanted this lifestyle. They didn't want their biological parents to be drug addicts and leave them. And they also didn't want to be sexually abused by their foster parents. All they needed was a chance to live normally and happily with big dreams like most 10-year-olds. But that unfortunately wasn't the case, and I hope they live a better life with their new parents. On January 25, 2025, a warehouse employee was ready to end his shift. He had texted a girl on Instagram named Alexis Hoskins, a girl he was interested in since he and his girlfriend weren't together anymore. They had planned to meet with each other once his shift ended. Alexis sent him her location to meet. Once he had arrived, Alexis wanted to go to McDonald's and a liquor store to get a couple of booze for the night. After getting the drinks, Alexis wanted to hang around her house for the night. So she told him to drive to this location, 49th Street, Primrose Avenue. It wasn't known how long the drive was, but to estimate it was probably around 10 to 15 minutes away. Once he and Alexis got there, Alexis told him to wait a minute, so he did. Although he felt it was quite odd since they were parked in the middle of the street, and he had no clue why Alexis told him to wait. But he just brushed it off since Alexis was there to chat with him, and he really didn't care. However, after a minute passed by, there was a person standing in the middle of the road who had a hoodie on. Neither Alexis nor her date knew since it was in the middle of the night. But once that person got up close to the car, shots were fired. Both Alexis and the random man with the hoodie on fled, leaving Alexis' date dead in the car. Police had arrived after 2 hours, where they saw the employee in a pool of blood. They investigated the car and were able to identify the victim, Jarrell Pryor. It turns out Jarrell was a 26-year-old father of a 2-year-old kid. He and his ex-girlfriend were separated, leaving the kid to Jarrell, where he would take care of her, knowing how hard and expensive it is to raise a kid. Jarrell was a calm and collected man with a big heart and dreams, and he always cared for the people around him, especially his family. And once his family got the news about what happened to him, they were crushed and couldn't believe the story the police provided. But 2 weeks after Jarrell's passing, police finally managed to get hold of the suspects, who were Alexis Hawkins and her boyfriend Brian Winston Jr., who was the one who shot Jarrell. Alexis tried to deny that she was involved in the shooting, but still, she was silent once investigators told her about the text messages. Alexis and Brian planned to kill Jarrell in advance to take what he has on him, and all this was sought out by her boyfriend. As of May 2025, both couples are in custody and are awaiting trial, and they are charged with murder and robbery. But Jarrell's family doesn't care about the sentencing since nothing can bring back Jarrell. And knowing Jarrell's 2-year-old daughter doesn't have a dad now is the last thing they hoped for both her and their son. In the early mornings of 2012, an elderly woman named Nancy Harris was working at a convenience store as she usually does. A man came in and told the woman to go to the cash register with him since he needed help. Once they got over there, the man threatened Harris to give him the money in the cash register. Since Harris was in her 70s, she couldn't do anything to the man who was twice her size and much stronger, so she did what he demanded. However, when she was taking the money out of the register, the man doused her with lighter fluid, then lit her on fire. Harris gave out a terrifying scream as she tried to extinguish the fire, while the man calmly got the cash and walked out of the store. Harris tried extinguishing the fire at a sink, which barely did anything, so she ran outside for help, but she collapsed on the ground right in front of the store. Fortunately, people saw her, so they called the police. Paramedics and the police had arrived at the scene, but it was too late. Harris had already passed away. She was sustained 2nd to 4th degree burns to her face, arms, hands, chest, and legs. Police were confused about how this had happened, so they asked the witnesses, but they had no clue. No one was inside the store besides Harris and that strange man, so the witnesses really couldn't give anything. But one of the officers requested to check the CCTV footage before and after the incident. Upon checking the footage showed the man entering the store and asking Harris to go over to the cash register. That's when the man poured the lighter fluid on Harris and set her on fire. The police had solid evidence to lock this man up, so they investigated, and not long after they found the man near a gas station. Once they took the man to the police station, they interrogated him. The man's full name was Matthew Lee Johnson, and he admitted to burning Harris alive. And he also admitted he was high on crystal at that time. He told the investigators he needed more money for more crystal, so he had no choice but to rob Harris. It turns out Johnson had been using substances since he was a middle schooler and hasn't stopped ever since. The investigators gathered all the evidence for the trial. He admitted everything during his trial to the judge. After Johnson's testimony, the judge finally made his decision and gave Johnson the death penalty. And on May 20th, 2025, Matthew Lee Johnson was executed with lethal injection. In 2017, a website was launched that garnered massive attention for its content. Surprisingly, since the website was on the clear web, nobody said anything about it. Well, nobody said anything about it until 4 years later. Someone finally had the guts to report the website to the police. The victim, yes, this was a victim from the website. He had told police all the details of what had happened to him. He provided a USB stick with 6,000 WhatsApp messages and over 100 images and videos. The victim also told police he was cut with a scalpel and was electrocuted while being strapped to a bed. The victim went on by saying how he got his testicles clamped and how the suspect had used a hot iron to brand him with the initials EM. The victim gave out the location where the suspect was living. Once the police had arrived, they raided his apartment and found body parts inside, mostly testicles that were left in his freezer, including his own. The police detained him and questioned him, and he admitted that he had done those inexplicable things to the victim. He identified himself as Marius Gustafsson. Gustafsson was a 47-year-old Norwegian man who lived in the UK. He told officers he had done similar acts to his other victims and posted them to his website, unarkmaker.com. Upon checking the website, officers found multiple videos and subscription to watch certain videos. The videos contained the Gustafsson victims being tortured. These tortures involve his victim being castrated, having penile amputations, and having limbs amputated. He would pay his guests to consent to his torture, and the tools Gustafsson used were knives and scalpels, dry ice to freeze the limbs, mostly the feet, and homemade clamps for testicles. Gustafsson would often stream the tortures on his website, which would garner over 20,000 views, and the viewers would pay Gustafsson to pick a body part they would like to remove from the victim. British investigators say he made over 200,000 euros from his website alone. If that weren't enough, he would sell human remains for around 100 euros, which people would actually buy just to keep as a collection or eat them. Gustafsson himself would also eat the remains if he felt hungry. Keep in mind, some of his victims were as young as 16, and if the procedures went wrong, there was no going back. But eventually, this gruesome act would finally stop, since Marius Gustafsson has been given a life sentence in prison, with a minimum of 22 years served. His little sidekicks have also been put behind bars, with all pleading guilty to GBH.